We're live.
Hi,
Welcome,
everyone.
everyone.
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about a subject that we love, corn. We'll try not to be too corny. There is a reason why we had to use the word corn in some platforms because it is still a stigma, and I'm not sure why. So this is Christian Dominique, neuroscientist and co-founder of AWE Digital Wellness. I'm here with my co-founder Mark Ritter, and he's also a neuroscientist and a therapist. And he has seen a lot of effects on porn addiction. I used to be, for over a year, a sex researcher. Yes, that's a fun thing to say in cocktail conversation. So we can talk about sex compulsion, addiction, porn addiction, and all those lovely things. And if you're live joining, feel free to put some comments, and we'll try to respond to your inquiries. So, Mark, do you want to go ahead and talk about why we're doing this today?
Absolutely. As Christian mentioned, I'm a psychologist. I work primarily with men. And when you work with men, you start to see a lot of common issues, relationship issues or things related to social media addiction, internet addiction, being on Instagram, TikTok, Reddit all day, and being unable to control the urges. But something that I've been seeing over the last couple of years, and it's sort of an alarming trend, is the number of men who are giving up on the dating market and just staying on porn websites all day or OnlyFans sites, right? And I really believe that they're using this as a way to supplant a need for connection and intimacy, right? And part of the problem is that we live in a culture, society where these mediums are so accessible, right? If you lived 100 years ago, you couldn't go onto a porn website or OnlyFans website and spend your time there. But nowadays, there's no real incentive to actually go out and meet people for a young man in his 20s or in his 30s or even in his 40s, right? And so somebody could just stay home on a Friday night and go on a porn website and or spend time with an OnlyFans creator, be subscribed to them, and find enjoyment, short-term enjoyment in that, right? But on the long term, this creates a lot more isolation, loneliness, feelings of frustration, and higher rates of impulsivity, right? And so this alarming trend is one of the reasons we're talking here today about porn addiction in the first place. So I'm really glad that we can have this conversation and that we can bring awareness to this problem. It's not necessarily a new problem. It's something that's been talked about for the last 10 to 15 years. There's there's accounts right on Instagram like Fight the New Drug that are actually trying to address the problem, and a lot of it is about bringing awareness to it, and that's what we're doing here today. So thank you everyone for attending.
Great. And there's also a Reddit movement like NoFap. And we'll
No
talk
fap.
about all this. Thanks everyone again for joining.
Hmm.
Free to make comments now. I know it's a sensitive subject. If you want to do private comments, reach out to us afterwards. And why is it so sensitive? Can we start by saying why is still in 2025 pornography a taboo? We know that there is 100 billion views of pornography a year, more than 100 billion views, and that's more than LinkedIn, Netflix, Pinterest, X, and Instagram combined, right? So Instagram, IG, or is it instant gratification? What do you think, Mark?
I think a lot of it is instant gratification, and like I said before, the brain evolved to scavenge for information the same way that our hunter-gatherer ancestors scavenged for food, right? And so information used to be extremely valuable to us in our environment. It would give us clues about our survival and would tell us, what to look out for. The problem is that we're still using ancient hardware in this very modern world, and we're inundated with information every day. Advertisements, people telling us what to do, enticing hooks on reels content. And some of the most enticing reels or content that you see online is sexual, right? Sex sells is the saying. It's very much true, right? And that's in the name of the game. is attention, right? It's the most valuable commodity you see online nowadays. So if I can get someone's attention, right, guarantee a little bit more watch time on my video, the algorithm's going to say, okay, let's show this reel to more people. It's more virality, more followers, more monetization for this person. So you're seeing this with a lot of OnlyFans creators, what young women, 18, 19. I just read a study about this today, right? That women in college are increasingly turning to OnlyFans to fund their college tuition because college has become so expensive in the United States, right? This is an unsettling reality that we don't really want to talk about, but from an economic point of view, it makes complete sense, right? If something's becoming so unaffordable, the only thing that a young 18, 19-year-old woman has to offer in society is her looks and to be compensated for that. So it's an alarming trend because it's teaching young people that, okay, the easiest way to make a fast buck is to sexualize yourself and put these videos of yourself online that are going to be there forever, right? Even when you get older and you might regret it. And then it's teaching the men to not actually approach the women, but to actually subscribe for $15 a month and to just consume their content like this anyways, right? And this is creating greater feelings of isolation, alienation, anxiety, depression, and it's having a very worrisome trend on people.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Mark. And are you saying that I should be sexier? What's your take on that?
Absolutely, both of us
A
need to show a little more cleavage
should
on
I
this.
show more? Yes. Okay.
Open up one of those buttons. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, uh, the story about OnlyFans. I actually had a friend last week tell me that he is in college now, and in high school he knew this girl, and she was I think at 18 or 19, like you mentioned, started her OnlyFans, and like he was concerned for her, and kind of there is still a stigma, right? So we can talk about is prostitution morally or good or not. We want to give the idea of safety, and is online showing your body better than being a stripper or doing prostitution. Some countries have legalized prostitution, like Germany, Australia, Panama, Singapore. Some have not, and Canada and most of the US
Yeah.
are it's not legal. But so we have now this digital tool to use and to exchange money for kind of sexual services or increasing fantasy world, right? And what is that costing us? And is that good or bad according to you? So my story is, my friend told me, like 2 years later, she regretted going on OnlyFans, and she didn't make much money, and then found out that one of the main subscriber that was paying whatever bucks per month was actually a school staff, right? So that, and I'm not judging people who are on OnlyFans or doing or watching porn.
Yeah.
Again, we're not judging. We're just trying to figure out what are the problems and solutions. And what do you think, Mark?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's a trend that is just growing more and more. And um, with regards to that story, again, the barrier to entry is so low, and people nowadays in Canada, in the US, are facing immense financial pressure, whether it is to pay the rent, pay their college tuition. I mean, lots of young people in Canada, especially, are finding life just unaffordable in the big cities, right? So if you can't get a job, right? If you go on LinkedIn and apply for jobs all day and you'll hear back from like one person every month because the job market has become so saturated, right? If you're doing everything you can to make a living and you're just barely scraping by, you're obviously going to look for the solution that has the lowest barrier to entry. And again, if you are a young, attractive woman, right, with a camera, the easiest way today in today's day and age is to create an OnlyFans account. But even then, it's the success is not guaranteed because there's statistics saying that it's only the top 0.01% of creators who actually make enough money to become rich and successful. But we hear about all these examples of like, oh yeah, OnlyFans creators making so much money. Yeah, well, the reality is it's a very small percentage in terms of the total number of creators going on the platform, right? But it's giving young women the wrong idea about how to become successful in today's day and age. So on the one hand, it's worrisome for young women, but it's also, and I really like that you use the terms prostitution. I mean, the late Charlie Kirk actually referred to this exactly as prostitution, right? That there is almost nothing indistinguishable from prostitution and selling yourself online for monetary gain, right? The only difference being, right, there is no actual sexual intercourse going on. Well, actually, yeah, if you film yourself, right, and put it on OnlyFans or on a porn website, you are gaining from that. So there is almost nothing indistinguishable from making that of some form of prostitution, right? You're selling your body, you're selling the image of your body, the content of your body to a vast public of people, right? You don't see them because they're behind a screen, but there's lots of people paying $15, $20 a month for a subscription, right? Sexualizes young women, and it teaches men, again, that instead of approaching a girl, going out and meeting women and increasing the likelihood that they'll meet their future wife, it's better to just pay $15 a month and stay in your room alone, right? And what are the consequences of that, right? We're already seeing that there's a huge loneliness epidemic going on.
Uh, Thanks, Mark. And going back to the danger, can we pause and saying, okay, what can we imagine that technology, pornography, could have as a positive effect, right? So we're not here to demonize anything. We want to have a balanced approach to the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say pornography is taboo. It was not always in human history. And so when do we think that porn actually started to exist? Could it be the event of video, probably before? So photography in 19th century?
Yep.
No, actually way before, right? You had
Yep.
literary, erotica, pornography, with words. And
Yep.
then, there's cave, I went to Sri Lanka. There's a Sigiri, a beautiful temple, and
Yep.
there's pictures of very beautiful women with big breasts, and right. So that's a form of pornography. So it's been there for a long time, and it's been serving a purpose. So what's the purpose that it served?
I think the purpose that it serves is to fulfill some deep need that people feel, the need for love and connection and erotica, right, in their life. And you mentioned the cave drawings. I went to Pompeii, and you know, the Romans were super sexual, right? You can just go visit, Rome or Pompeii, and you'll see tons of statues of guys, with doing some sort of sexual act with another
Great.
woman or a good goddess, right? And that has existed throughout human history. So yes, pornographic material has existed throughout human history, and the purpose of that was to satiate some desire, some need that people felt, right? And I think the difference nowadays, again, there's a difference between looking at cave drawings in Sri Lanka or a pottery in the Roman Empire with images of people having sex, to the experience that people have nowadays through digital media. It is night and day. It looks more realistic than ever, right? People collect data. These companies can collect data to know exactly the type of content to show to you at which time when you're feeling lonely, right? It's almost a form of manipulation, right? It's very intrusive what's going on.
And we can talk about the diversity, right? We have the diversity of porn. We have so many niche, right? So,
Yeah.
right, and then we also can think of the technologies even getting better, right? So we have 4K, 8K, we have POVs, then we're gonna have virtual reality, then
Yeah.
anime and AI, right? So how far can we go, and how is that affecting our brain and neuroscience?
Well, it literally does not stop with the screen. The advent of sex dolls are upon us, right? So you can put on a VR headset and have like a lifelike robot there to fulfill your deepest fantasies because you have trouble initiating that first form of connection with a person, approaching the girl at the bar, going out and speaking to people, right? the Again, the lowest barrier to entry is to just pay so you can avoid the uncomfortable experience of meeting a person. It's a very sad reality that we in, but it's not all, you know, dark and gloomy, of course, right? It's just that people are being conditioned in some sort of way to lose that which makes us human, right? This need for connection to go out and talk to people, and technology cannot supplant that entirely.
Agreed. And I'm also talking to a lot of couples and seeing how porn is affecting the relationship, right? So in terms of relationship, there's one study that shows that if there is porn use in the relationship, there's 2 times more likelihood of breakup, right?
Mhm.
So that's pretty big. But then we also want to nuance it that, in a relationship, porn can be useful. And if there's communication around it, and if the couple, for instance, are watching pornography together and it's helping their libido or sex drive, and they're discovering and exploring with curiosity and openness, and it's not secretive, then it could also be positive. But in general, it's not being used as that. It's being used as a solo act. I have a study here that talks about sexual satisfaction and sexual function effect of porn use. It is a study by a Canadian group, and
Mhm.
they look at sexual function. Let me give you the details on that one. Um, so it's association between contents of pornography and sexual satisfaction and function among young adults, 2024. And what we learn from this is that um, basically the frequency of masturbation
Mhm.
is moderately associated and positively to pornographic content view, and it is negatively associated with sexual satisfaction, right? So it is possible to have positive pornography use. In the literature, we talk about problematic pornography use or non-problematic positive use. There might be a positive eventually section, but now we're just looking at, is it useful or is it problematic, right? And what would you say are some of the signs that are problematic? Because we're saying here, even you increase your frequency, so maybe that we'll talk about the no fap movement before. So more masturbation, more porn content, and less sexual satisfaction. Okay, that's one way to look at it. But then let's put it in context, and what could be some of the context that can mitigate those general trends.
Um, could you explain what you mean by the context that could mitigate the general trends of
Yeah,
pornography use?
so the context could be the type of the time of day. So there's another say that says people are watching porn normally between 7 p.m. and
Yeah,
3 a.m. So that's
yeah.
80% watching it at night to like maybe distress of their day. And
Mhm.
then so the time, the context, are you watching it alone, secretive, with someone, and also the type
Yeah,
of porn, which contents are you watching?
yeah. I mean, from what I've learned from my patients, that the behavior is generally a reflection or it's a reaction to some emotional state. So the context, it's less important, more so the feelings that are associated with this maladaptive behavior. So for example, right, if um, someone is feeling bored or lonely, right, and they've conditioned themselves over long periods of time to solve this problem of loneliness and boredom by going on a porn website, you're going to reinforce that behavior over time because you're teaching your brain to get some sort of reward from that action or behavior, right? It's a habituated reward response over time. Over many years, this habit becomes more and more ingrained, right? But after you've watched porn, after you've masturbated to it, the feeling that ensues is a deeper sense of often is a deeper sense of loneliness and shame around the action, right? Which causes people to fall into this spiral, right? Of feeling lonely, using pornography, feeling ashamed or even more lonely about it, isolating themselves more, and feeling more lonely. And they just spin in this circle and they can't get out of that. So the context is very important because it predicts the emotional state, and the emotional state often predicts the behavior, that how people react to it, their coping mechanisms.
Great insight, Mark. And what are some of the things that we can conceptualize and actually help people with in terms of helping their awareness of their emotional state and their regulation of their emotional state?
Well, I always try to remind people that at the end of the day, they have a choice. They have a choice in the actions that they make in their life. They have a choice in how they respond to events in life. They might not have a choice about things like the weather or how other people react or whether somebody decides to drive one place or what their neighbors might do on a given day. There's certain events that are outside of their control. But what's within their control is how do they respond to certain impulses or thoughts that come up in their mind, right? Sometimes they feel like they don't have any control because they're not even aware, right? They might be going through their day and they might think of, some pornographic image that they saw online 2 days ago, right? And that thought leads to the desire, right? The desire leads to some sort of anticipation of the reward, right? If I watch porn, I'm going to feel good, right? I'm feeling horny right now. I'm going to watch porn, right? So that is almost acted upon unconsciously. People will go about and use a porn website and they'll feel bad about it. But this whole process, right? There's a series of steps going on in your mind, right? Having a thought, reacting to it, and going onto the website, right? That series of steps is not happening outside of your control. The awareness of it is within your control, right? Most people are just not aware of the problem. So things like mindfulness and meditation can really, really help in just becoming more aware of your thoughts, your impulses, your behaviors, and understand that you have the power in every moment of time to break this cycle, right? Most people don't realize that they have this control because they don't have the awareness over these impulses.
Thanks, Mark. Awareness is what we're trying to give with this podcast specifically, with this company in general.
Yes.
AWE stands for awareness, wellness, and enjoyment. Porn use could be some form of enjoyment, but let's make sure that it's appropriate and that we can talk about the potential downfall of it, right?
Yeah.
Just to explain, a little bit of context of some of the research that I had been doing in sexual desire, right? So there is different types of sexual desire, and you can have an intrinsic sexual desire, so it's coming from you, it's coming from your biology, you just have a desire.
Yeah.
It could be responsive to someone or something that arouse you, and then you can also have some types of identity, right? So am I seeing myself sexually? Does that include in my identity that I'm either doing sex or watching porn? Or and then you can also have a contextual, like, is it in a relationship, am I doing this to avoid conflict, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
all types of reason to have desire and to act on the sexual behaviors, including porn use. But we can say that pornography use falls into two categories, right? So one is sexual behavior, and we know that there is now in the ICD-11 a new addiction or compulsion, which is called compulsive sexual behavior,
Mm-hmm.
CSB. So that's actually a clinical criteria. So we can have that, and that could be linked or not to porn. And then we have also the other side, which is digital addiction, right? So is it a sexual construct or a digital construct, or probably both, right? And how can we navigate this complicated field of having this sexual primal good thing, right? We all come from sex. We need sex in life. Sex is a positive thing. But how does it become, too much, and how does technology play a role in that? What are some of your thoughts, Mark?
I think technology has a multiplicative effect on the desire for sure, right? Because again, you're meant to get this thing in doses, right? To fulfill this desire in doses. We have this deeper need. But again, these doses become into an endless water spout, right? A fire hydrant of uh, of material, right? Of content, of things that will scratch that itch, right? And no one is stopping you from turning off that fire hydrant. No one, right? It's you against these, companies, these pornographic companies. I mean, the owner of, I think most porn websites are actually controlled by one company called MindGeek, right? This guy's like a billionaire, right? Because he runs ads on his website. Everybody wants to get those ads, right? Because those are the ones making the most money, right? So there's somebody at the end of the day who's profiting off of your attention, right? And attention, again, we haven't talked about all of the consequences that this is causing for men in particular, but rates of erectile dysfunction amongst younger men are increasing steadily, right? I have one study here saying that it's gone up from 12 to 25% in young men between the ages of 20 to 35, right, over the last 30 years. Viagra use has increased over the last couple of years as well, from 0.77% in 1998 to 1.42% in 2002 to 12% in 2015, right? Amongst younger men, sildenafil was meant for older men who had erectile problems, not for younger men. Right? This problem is not physiological; it's completely psychological. It's a result of the desensitization towards sexuality, right? From this, again, this fire hydrant of content that we're being bombarded with on a daily basis, and no one is there to stop you. There's no one to step in the way. It used to be parents, right? But even parents don't have 100% control over what their children are seeing nowadays, right? So
thanks for that. And it's clear, and I can also explain with some of the other findings of the study, that it's clear that it's a psychological construct, and it's porn that's doing it. It's not masturbation. So there is porn use, there's masturbation. They're not always linked, but of course they're linked. And then in this study it says that the masturbation is linked with actually slight but positive increase of function, right? So you can imagine that it's like a muscle. You can masturbate, and then
yep.
for men you can get better. For women it's probably even better because you're using the Kegel muscles and having better orgasm and all these things. So it's not the masturbation or the sex that's the problem. It's really the pornographic that's creating this psychological problem. And how would you define how does watching porn affect you in terms of perhaps idolizing certain types of sex or men or women, or activities that you don't find in real life? Like, what does that translate to according to you, Mark?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because again, it's always been known that it creates some sort of unrealistic standard of what sex is like. Like, you get these actors who just look, tons of plastic surgery done on them, who don't really resemble the girl next door. But even that, people are moving beyond that. Then they're moving increasingly to more realistic content, more amateur-like content, because and I've heard this from a lot of people. It's not, at the end of the day, it's actually not necessarily the pornographic the sexual content itself. It's more this girlfriend experience, like the feeling that you're watching something that seems real, right? The girl from your university, or some seeing two people in an act that is familiar to you. And this is why OnlyFans is becoming so popular, because a lot of these content creators are selling the girlfriend experience, right? Doing these online chat rooms, right? Offering this sort of connection with people. And that is what is at the heart of all of this, right? It's that need for intimacy, that need for connection.
And talking about this, I have interesting questionnaire for you and the public if you want to play the game. There's, we'll look at 4 types of sexual content and pornography. One is looking at multi-partner sex, so that could be threesomes, orgy. One is taboo and forbidden sex. One is power, control, and rough sex, and the other is passion and romance, right? So which do you think is number 1 and number 2 for men, and which do you think is number 1 and number 2 for women?
It's a good one. I would imagine for women, number 1 is passion and romance. And then number 2, yeah, I'm going to go with, what were the other options? Rough sex, and what were the other ones?
Taboo and forbidden, or multi-partner?
Probably taboo, I would say, is the second one for women. And then forbidden for men. Uh, you said rough sex was one of them as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be the other one. Those would be my guesses, but I'm curious to hear.
So you got the right for passion and romantic for women. Everyone could
Mhm.
have guessed that. Number two is multi-partner sex, and it's quite close. And taboo and power are less. For men, number one, you got it right. It's taboo and forbidden. And number two is quite close, 1% difference, and it's passion and romance. So
Ah, yeah.
exactly what we're talking about. The intimacy that you're missing
Hmm.
is actually reflected on what people see and use.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's not so surprising actually, right? A lot of the same needs between men and women are being fulfilled.
Yeah, there's a lot of information about rough sex being more and more available, and
Yeah,
it exists, but the real human needs are still there. We want that human connection, we want that romance, we want that passion and that intimacy, right? And that's what people are really seeking. And I think it's our duty to talk about it and help people realize that that's what they're seeking, and then giving them options to seek it in more healthy ways, right? Healthier ways.
exactly. Yeah. And I think the healthier ways is often not talked about because people have trouble just mitigating, right? Mediating their own access to it. There's no way to stop them.
So yeah, just to give you the number of that study, it was 84% taboo and forbidden, and 83% passion and romance. So
Interesting.
quite close.
Okay. Yeah. Have you found any studies, like neuroimaging studies, on the effect of porn on the brain? I'd be curious to hear a little more. I know of a few.
Yeah, so I have one from Spain. This is
Hmm.
Testa and colleagues,
Hmm.
research group in Spain, and they talk about impulsivity, looking at porn use, but also online sexual activities, OnlyFans, others, and looking at compulsive sexual behavior and problematic porn use. And they found that the neuropsychological perspective allows us to figure out that executive network is being lessened, right? So that's for non-neuroscientists. It's that you can't think clearly and logically. So the logical part of your brain is being has dysfunction when you're watching porn, um,
Hmm.
and it's related to impulsivity, right? So mainly the inhibitory control. So you cannot stop because you cannot think clearly and you're acting on impulse. So people cannot regulate their behavior anymore, or
Yeah.
it's hard to do. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. Um, I mean, I've heard of similar studies, just confirming what you just said about cue reactivity, right? And so basically, how reactive is somebody with problematic porn usage versus a control, right? So there was a study, I think, by Gola and colleagues from 2018, where they're talking about wanting versus liking and problematic porn use. And they basically looked at these participants under an fMRI, so functional magnetic resonance imaging, and to look at what happens at the resting state, or and then they looked at what happens when they expose certain images to participants of erotic images and non-erotic images. And so they saw that the people with problematic porn usage had increased BOLD activation. So the BOLD stands for blood oxygenated level dependency. So it's a way to measure certain activation in the brain. They see more activation in the ventral striatum, which is often responsible for um, your when we talk about people with addiction, and rewards, right? The ventral striatum, it plays a very important role. So people,
Motivation, reward pathway.
motivation, exactly. So people with pornographic problematic pornographic usage have much higher motivation and act and reward response when they see erotic images. So you think about it like this, actually, that the more porn you watch, the more you're conditioning yourself to be motivated when you think about porn or when you see some sort of imagery for it, right? So this is keeping you in a trap, in a vicious cycle, because the more you watch, like the more of the less control you have over your inhibition. And this is proven, at a neuropsychological level by the studies that we're mentioning here,
And
right?
I have
It,
another study, which is a systematic review, 2025, a little bit more recent, and talks also about not only impulsivity but compulsivity, right? So
mhm.
uh, it's the name of the study is compulsive sexual behavior and problematic porn use on the impulsivity compulsivity axis um, stream. So what that means is that, as you mentioned, and in neuropsychology, this is the motivation network, right? So you're motivated to go to work, motivated to feed yourself, your kids, motivated to go to the gym, motivated to do everything, and motivated for the fun stuff as well, right?
Mm,
Which all this can be fun. Now, some people have more or less impulsivity, meaning that if they see something on their way to work, they might be more spontaneous or impulsive, and
yeah.
some people might get into compulsivity, right? And you talked about the VTA, the ventral tegmentum area. There's also the nucleus accumbens, and we
Mhm.
know that the dopamine, dopamine is used by many people in dopamine detox, but it's not exactly like that. Dopamine is used in many ways and change, and depends where it's used and how its receptors are. There's different types of receptors. But long story short, when you have this dopamine activation, more specifically to the lower nucleus accumbens, then you'll have more of the impulsivity. And
Mm,
as you do that behavior more and more impulsively,
mhm.
then you will come to the compulsive, right? So we talked about
Yeah.
compulsive behavior, and that comes from dopamine going in the higher region of the nucleus
Yeah.
accumbens.
I think it's important to also distinguish here between what a compulsion is and what is an impulse here,
Yeah,
right? Um, and it makes absolute sense with what you said before. So in the beginning, right, during this process of habituation, right, you have this impulse, this desire, this curiosity to engage in uh, the object of pleasure that gives you dopamine, right? It could be watching porn. But over time, the more you do it, the more you habituate yourself to this. Actually, what happens afterwards is a deficit, a dopamine deficit, which needs to be replenished. So what compulsion is really a repeated behavior that is used to deal with some sort of internal discomfort that somebody feels, right? That is what a compulsion is. An impulse is really the the desire or the thought to use that thing, but without the need to necessarily mitigate some uncomfortable feeling that's people feel inside. So the more you use it, the more you are actually operating at a baseline deficit in dopamine, the more you're going to feel compelled, right, to use that stimulus, right, pornographic usage or drugs, for example, to actually feel normal, right? So over time, that deficit is going to get bigger and bigger, and you're going to feel less and less willpower.
yeah. Willpower is another interesting subject of debate, the research, and
Yeah,
including in motivation. Um, when we talk about safety online, OnlyFans, other and pornographic content, there is a great debate on. We talked about prostitution, but also porn. So there's some countries that are banning porn
yeah,
altogether. China, Indonesia, Tanzania, and others, right?
hmm,
So you cannot watch it; it's illegal. You can get some sanctions, maybe go to
yeah.
jail. And well, people still do, right? But what do you think? Is there a net positive, negative of pornography? How can we be the most balanced view of seeing it as something that exists and that we should perhaps be more conscious and aware and can maybe more debate about? Because people, maybe you see clients that cannot debate about it. It's a shame. They're ostracized. There might be some religious connotation to it, some moral stigma.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
So the positive and negative of pornography usage, right? That's what the question is. Okay. So let's start with the positive because this is a very interesting question that I haven't thought enough about. But I could perhaps the positive being that it is uh, profiting a lot of young women financially who perhaps didn't have the financial resources before on OnlyFans. Not all of them, like we said before, but a lot of them are making lots of money that they had never imagined before, uh, which is good. Um, Another positive being it could be a release for people who have real difficulty attracting a mate, right? I think Louis C.K. Had this joke once. He's like, yeah, people say there's somebody for everybody. Nope, that's not true. That there's some people who are just undesirable out there. And I think, yeah, it might not be entirely true, but there might be some people who have real problems, right? Um, Finding sexual gratification because either they are just physically very unattractive, they're perhaps in a situation where they're not able to um, have a partner. Uh, People in jail, for example, if they don't have conjugal visits, right? It could be a way to find a release for people who don't have access to, you know,
And
uh,
before you answer the other part of the question, I
yeah,
wanted to jump in on that positive potential aspect. Like I said, it could be positive in the couple situation, but as an individual, it's also interesting. I was in a conference where, so sex research conference, where there was two great talks about the sexual rights that we have, right? So it's, there is some movement that's saying that sex should be a human right, that we should have right to have sex,
hmm
and then that would include people that have physical disabilities,
yeah,
that cannot go and get a mate, can
yeah,
include people with mental, and which we have also
yeah,
excluded, right? So people are, let's say, neurodivergent or low
yeah,
IQ with difficulty socializing, and we're saying, well, you're acting like a kid, so we cannot sexualize you, and therefore you
mhm,
cannot have sex. But those groups are saying, actually, we do and need to have sex as well. It's part of human existence, right?
yeah. And I'm thinking, yeah, I have an interesting question for you. Like, what about like criminals or repeat sexual offenders, right? If it could be used to lower the recidivism, right? So if them watching porn, gratifying themselves to porn, decreases the rate of them actually repeating a crime and sexually assaulting again, that would be a net positive. But I
Yeah.
think that argument could also be turned on its head and say, okay, sexual offender who or somebody who's committed sexual assault before watching pornography often could also increase the likelihood that they will commit this crime again. I think it could go both ways perhaps, and it becomes a very complex issue. Um,
Well, my
yeah,
suggestion for that would be to, link that with, some coaching or therapy, right? So
yeah,
see individually, is that helping or not, right?
yeah,
It's not a blanket prescription of porn. I don't think that would be helpful,
yeah,
but use it as one of the tools that could have some positive effects in some specific context.
yeah, for sure. And I think, like I said, there's people who acknowledge that their sexual desires are wrong. They're morally incongruent with what society, like I think pedophilia is the best example of this. And there's been debate about do we create AI generated content, right, to satisfy the needs of pedophiles so they don't actually commit any crimes, right? And I think it's a very complicated and tricky subject because a lot of people feel very uncomfortable about talking about this in the first place. But at the end of the day, you know, all humans, like you said before, have a sexual need and desire. Most humans, there are some asexual people out there, but most people feel this real desire and they're going to find a way to fulfill this need in some sort of way, right? Whether it's going on a pornographic website, whether it is trying to meet a person in real life, or as unfortunately as it has been, but throughout history, right, forcefully trying to produce a sexual encounter by rape, right? So there's a lot of ways that people will go about trying to fulfill this desire, some maladaptive, some negative, and some good, right? That benefits people overall. So, yeah,
I think that, you mentioned asexuality, but even people with asexuality, which is being more and more defined, can and normally have still desire for connection and intimacy, right?
yeah,
Might not be the super sexual desire that other people are having, but they do have other desires that are similar in the same spectrum of intimacy, connection, which is all related.
hmm
And there's a great professor and researcher that is in Ontario that has this framework. If you want to know more about that, reach out to me. That talks about how you can conceive sexuality and sexuality, polyamory, monogamy, homosexuality in a spectrum that is not fixed but more dynamic, right? And it's like you can be this and feel this today, but your core is more like this, and you can share that, right? So again, when we can talk about topics like pedophilia in this forum and communicate in a really hopefully the most non-judgmental, we're not here to point fingers at anything or anyone or any person or any groups, communities. We're just here to debate and elevate the discussion. And I had a friend of mine that was for over a year responding to a pedophilic helpline where people could anonymously say, "I have these urges, and I
it's a
feel
tough
bad,"
job.
right?
Yeah,
And we should be able to try to find solutions to help them as well, because they're human beings and they have those
yeah.
feelings. They're
I,
struggling.
yeah, no, I understand the moral judgment towards these people, right? The hatred for taking the innocence away from somebody so young, right? And oftentimes, hurt people will hurt other people, right? It's oftentimes people who have been victims of sexual abuse or assault when they were children who will enact this, who will do this to other people, other children when they're older. This is horrible. We want to stop it, right? Absolutely. But again, as a preventative measure, we have to think about preventative measures that are going to decrease the likelihood of people repeating this cycle of behavior over time, right? If that entails pornographic content, right, the net outcome is positive, which means less children are being sexually assaulted, right? That's a net positive outcome. We want that in society. So, as uncomfortable as it may be, that might be the best solution to de-incentivize that behavior, because there are pedophiles who acknowledge that what they're doing is wrong, right? Who understand, and there's some who acknowledge it but will still act on the behavior, right? So again, people have these needs that need to be fulfilled in some sort of way, and um, the goal, perhaps, is to prevent this from happening, but not necessarily by shaming them, but by trying to provide some sort of medium through which they can satisfy these needs.
Thanks, Mark, for that eye-opening insight in terms of, let's look at the bigger pictures. Let's really not try to shame anything or anyone, and try to figure out and understand. Right, that's what we're trying to do with no non-judgment. What is this coming from? What is this desire? We talked about sexual desire. Um, there is a desire a desire to have sex with yourself. There is a desire to have sex with another partner, right? So that is actually, when we do study, there's now like a scale where there's three desires: one with yourself, one with other. So one could be with your partner, but one could also be with attractive other, right? So
Mm,
you want to only have sex with your partner, with yourself, or sometimes there's a cute guy or girl in the street and you actually have a desire to have sex with them. And now the desire could be online, right? So are you on a dating app and you're clicking and you're in a relationship or not, but you have desire for this attractive person? Or are you watching pornographic content, right? And I'm thinking that there might even be, in the future scales, I haven't had time to build that scale myself, but if researchers want to work with me on adapting that scales, I would think there is another scale, which is technology.
hmm
We talked about robots. We know that vibrators and other objects have been there for a long time, and some people can have desire to have that specific sexual experience. And then there might be, AI, robots, pornography, VR.
hmm
There might be people that are not looking to have desire to that person on the street or in class or at work, but specifically in that context as well. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we feel these desires every single day. I think that is normal, right? Even if you're in a relationship, I think it's still normal to feel desires towards other people. I think it's just the the primitive brain, right, acting upon what it sees in the environment. Um, the issue, and again, right, I don't want to demonize pornography on this podcast. It might have, maybe it sounds like I have been up until now. I'm just saying that um, the access to pornography, to pornographic material, unmitigated access, meaning as much as you want, anytime you want, whenever you want, um, is a net negative because of our natural inclinations to be attracted to people at any time of the day and to have these needs, right? So um, don't demonize the desire, the sexual desire, but I think demonizing the or shaming the monetization model, right? How these companies are profiting from this, the same way that it's been done with social media, right? Engaging reels that are fueled by algorithms, right? People know exactly what type of content to show to you at what time. And the consequence of this, you know, depression, isolation, suicidal tendencies, uh, this is happening. Christian, I don't think you understand the scale at which this is happening to people in society nowadays, right? The net effect that millions of people are suffering from this, right? It's a huge problem. This is why
And
no app.
why are we not talking about it enough? Why is it so difficult to actually talk about it?
I honestly think that there's just so much happening in the world right now that there's so much happening at once. People can't really keep up with all the bombardment of information that's coming at them 24/7. I think it is being talked about, but there's so much noise out there that it's hard. Like they have saying the 24-hour news cycle, right? What happened yesterday is old news, right? And it's we're constantly living in we're like a goldfish, right? We're constantly living in spurts of like 15-minute memory, right? And it's just going on and it's hard for us to like, yeah, okay, porn is bad. Yeah, I know that. And I've heard people talk about that, but like there's all this other stuff going on and it's just not it's not as salient in that moment, unfortunately.
So briefly want to talk about NoFap, right? So for the audience members that don't know, NoFap is there's some communities that suggest that we should abstain from watching porn, masturbating, having sexual intercourse, depending on the definition they want to have. Um, I have had the chance to see an RCT study looking at groups of male that were doing NoFap or not for 30 days, and it seemed like the NoFap group did not fare better in terms of
Hmm,
sexual satisfaction, life satisfaction, all those things.
interesting.
Um, what do you think might be the cause, and how can we engage um, these communities to tell us their lived experience and to say, I have done this, I felt this way, so that we can incorporate not only data but people's stories? And can you tell us some stories you've heard from maybe some of your clients?
Yeah. Before I jump to the stories, I just want to make sure I understood the results of the study completely. So the study suggests that the NoFap group did not have a significant difference in sexual
Yes. So,
satisfaction
it was the NoFap groups fare equal or worse than the NoFap or the regular group.
in terms of sexual satisfaction.
Yeah.
How did they measure?
Sexual satisfaction and life satisfaction, and there was a third one that was neutral.
Do you know how
Um,
they measured sexual satisfaction?
it was subjective scale. I don't remember which scale.
Okay,
I think it might have been
that's
the GSMX. Um,
that's very interesting. I'd love to look at that study because it kind of it's the opposite of what my hypothesis would have been, which would have been greater sexual satisfaction by abstaining from porn, right? Um, but perhaps it could also indicate just a general apathy towards sexuality, right? People just exited the sexual marketplace, right? They've just given up on trying to attract a mate. They've given up on porn, and they're just no interested anymore. This general apathetic state of just going through the rhythms of life, waking up, going to work, coming home, watching Netflix, going to sleep, all that stuff, paying the rent again and again, rinse and repeat for 10, 15, 20 years, and then their life just has flown by. So, I mean, that could be the general state of it that could explain the results. Um, from my own personal experience, you asked if I had stories from patients
Yeah.
uh, that resembled the results of the study, or what was it
No,
exactly?
that are in that they have tried abstaining, and
Yeah.
what do they feel about it?
Yes. Well, look, there's two movements really. You have the no fap movement, which really talks about not watching porn, and then you also have like the semen retention club, right? These are both like big internet memes, and the semen retention guys, they really believe in health benefits of not ejaculating. So it could be not watching porn or not, just abstaining from sex in general, right? I think there's Steve Jobs actually used to be part of this like semen retention group and thought that it helped him focus better and have better levels of focus, and because he has higher testosterone levels. I'm not sure whether this is true. I have to look on at the research on this. But generally, um, when you talk about going cold turkey on something, I mean, at the end of the day, that is the only way to overcome an addiction, is to go cold turkey in doses, right? Instead of 5 beers, you drink 4 beers per day, and then over time you try to get down to 0 beers, right? Um, at some point you have to completely abstain and acknowledge the impulse to go back and indulge again because of that need that you have. So um, the, the experience that I've had with patients, who try to abstain, generally, if they're not acknowledging the deeper core belief about themselves, right? If they're using the same software, they're oftentimes going to fall into the same behavior, right? Because they're not aware of the way that they're fulfilling these needs, of the way that they're responding to these deeper desires, right? They just feel like they're a puppet in this game of life, and they have no control over their actions whatsoever. And I think, again, gaining awareness over how your mind works, right? Where do you get your enjoyment from? Where do you get your pleasure? Where do you get your dopamine from, right? And understanding what sort of environments are going to have a higher outcome of, you becoming depressed or you watching porn. Becoming extremely cognizant of this is oftentimes one of the biggest solutions to helping overcome porn addiction.
So there's some various studies, and as we know, there is no porn addiction in terms of real clinical terms. So we talked about problematic porn use. Numbers go from 3% of the population to 5+, maybe 6, 7. Depends on the context, the age, all these things, but it's still a significant number, right? Even 3% is a significant number of the population that could be classified as problematic use or addicted, right?
Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit about what that looks like, and maybe some people that are watching this have experienced some of those symptoms? Maybe they know someone who has, or maybe they will experience in later in life. So
Mhm.
what does that look like when you're kind of really, and what we want to do is to prevent you to get to that point. But if
Yeah.
you're already there, what could that look like? How does someone who's addicted to porn wake up in the morning? Can you give an example?
Yeah, so I think, when we talk about addictions, it's not really an addiction unless it's having some sort of maladaptive effect on your life, right? If somebody watches porn and they're loving their life, they're loving their wife, great relationship, career is fantastic, it's not an addiction per se. It's not negatively affecting their life in any certain way. But if somebody who's addicted to porn, right, is missing out on doctor's appointments, right, or their work performance goes down because they go into the bathroom to watch porn and masturbate, or they're having erectile dysfunction with their partner, or they are staying in on a Friday night to watch porn instead of going out with friends, right? these are telltale signs that this could be negatively affecting your life, that porn has had some sort of effect on you. It's been conditioned to fulfill the needs and to prevent you from living the best life that you could have, right? These are some of the symptoms that I've seen in people. And generally, if people aren't aware of it, if they're fine with it, right, they'll fall deeper and deeper into this trap. But a lot of times people are aware of it and they feel lost, they feel stuck, and they feel like they can never get out of it.
Thanks for sharing. And yes, it has an impact. Sometimes the impact is obvious, sometimes it's small.
Yeah.
We know, for instance, that any social media use is normally associated with increased anxiety and depression,
Hmm.
perhaps loneliness.
Yeah.
And that's not even problematic use. That's just normal, non-problematic use has that effect, right? So sometimes the effects are small, and then sometimes they become. I think I remember you telling me about someone waking up in the morning with zero motivation and
Yeah.
asking himself, "Why did I watch that much porn last night?" And I'm a
Yeah.
nothing. I'm a this, right? So maybe we can talk about. And by the way, if you're still here after an hour, we decided today to go a little bit longer and deeper. No pun
Hmm.
intended. So the marketing team, if you're here, we're gonna try to do another 20 to 30 minutes if the platforms don't kick us out, because this is a great discussion and it's needed. So let's talk about how can people have desire, but then there's also the aversion, right? So they desire something, but they're fleeing something. So I thought of this phrase: a version of yourself that is less than or not enough.
A version of a version of yourself.
That
That
is
is,
less than or not enough.
huh. And that would be the explanation for why they use pornography.
The explanation of why or how they feel after. I think
Uh,
their self-esteem and use are
okay.
correlated, right?
So do you think it's the fear of failure, of being rejected, of not being good enough, uh, perhaps not wanting to go out in public and embarrass yourself about approaching a woman that could cause them to just say to go on pornographic websites in the first place? I mean, that's one of the explanations,
Well, I would
right?
say, as we talked in social media in general, people are afraid to talk to each other in general. Even, imagine even worse, asking someone out or being
Yeah,
vulnerable and saying that you like someone. Oh, you can do that, on your screen saying I like you, but can
yeah,
you do that in person? That's scary, right?
yeah. And I think Gen Z is having less sex actually than ever. As much as it's talked about, I think they're having less sex, and I think part of that is just because of these underdeveloped social skills, because of being on their phones all the time, right? Being higher use of social media, 5 to 6 hours per day on average amongst Gen Z on their phones. And yeah, it's having a lot of societal effects, right? Declining birth rates. Declining birth rates is a very possible consequence of all of this, right? You're even seeing certain countries like South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world, and I think it's something like 0.76 reproductive rate, meaning that every two parents have less than a child, right? That means the country is going to go extinct within like a century if that's the
Yeah,
case.
it's lower than point 0.7. It's 0.6 or 0.5 now. But I think we
So
should have a slogan that says, more porn, less humans, right? Something like that, right?
more porn, less humans. And I think, combine that with like a lot of societal trends you see in the West, like women and men, millennials prioritizing their careers over having children, right? I need to focus on my career. I'm not old enough. I'm not financially stable enough to have kids. All the while, a lot of these underdeveloped countries, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are having more children, right? And their reproductive rates are high. So in the West, you've got two problems. On the one hand, you've got men who are less likely to go out and approach women to start a relationship. And then on the other hand, you have just a general societal trend coupled with the financial pressures of living in a city in Canada or in the United States, so that you feel like you have to focus on your career more, and then you're too old, right, in the women's case, to have kids, because by the time you're 40s,
About nine
right?
to 10 years later that women are having their first
Yeah,
child a few decades ago. 9 to 10 years.
yeah, yeah. It's, I mean, it's not just technology here, people. It's like the economic trends that are causing a lot of this, right? The need to feel safe financially, right, and devote years to your career and delay having a children, because in the West, like, let's face it, having kids is expensive. It can be very expensive, right? In underdeveloped countries, kids are seen as a valuable resource who can help around on the farm, right? But in the West, it's just not prioritized. So one of the very real effects is declining birth rate. It's something that Elon has actually warned about many times. Is like the biggest. We shouldn't worry about overpopulation. We should really worry about population collapse. Collapse. As much as far-fetched as that might sound, it is a very real reality when you look, when demographers look at the declining birth rates uh, around the world.
Um, thanks for that, and I agree that it's definitely something to be worried about. Um, it's not only quantity, it's quality, but if we don't have the quantity, we will be extinct. So yeah, it's quite important.
Yeah, yeah, very
um,
important.
let's go back to one thing that we've talked about a little bit before in terms
Hmm.
of shame and stigma.
Sure.
um, I know, like, a few of your clients don't even give you really their real information. They're like, they don't want to, like, I've heard some don't even come on camera. um Sometimes it takes a few sessions before they open up. Like,
Yeah.
why do people feel so much shame by saying, hey, I have difficulty because there is this thing out there called pornography and I watch a bit too much of it?
Yeah, I mean, lots of reasons. For one, right, there could be religious reasons, right? If somebody grew up in a religious household and they were indoctrinated to believe that this is a very shameful thing that they need to hide, that they should never tell people, that they need to be punished for certain behavior. Um, Christianity, a lot of these monotheistic religions have had an immense impact and effect, influence on our culture and how we view sexuality. Right, the fact that we view it as a taboo subject has a lot of Judeo-Christian origin to it, and I think the um, people feeling shame around it, right? Being told by your religion that it is a shameful thing to have these desires, and then growing up in a society that reinforces that, right? In a very strict household, is one of the things that can contribute to a lot of the shame that people feel around in the first place.
100%, Mark. I think you got that part very well explained, and there is some data to back it up. There is some studies on religiosity, intensity of religious belief and behavior, and shame versus sex or pornography. And there, of course, like, the more intense you're religious, the more shame you'll have when you have sex or watch pornography, right? And again, we're not here. We don't want to shame anyone, right? If you're having sex, if you have desires or fantasies, if you're watching porn, that's okay. And we want to create a safe space where we can have those discussions in the community or in private, so that you know that you don't have to have that shame and guilt, right?
Absolutely, right. I think understanding, first of all, that there's people who use pornography out there who don't feel any shame about it, right? Then there's people who do feel shame about it, the same pornographic usage. Why is one behavior considered shameful and then somebody else doing it is not considered shameful, right? Well, there's probably a difference in how you view your own behavior versus how you view other people's behavior then, right? You think that there's something intrinsically wrong with you because you're doing it, but if you had a friend who was doing it, you would feel like, okay, it's not as bad, right? Because they're using it, and then they should get better, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and again, to be clear, we're not either against any specific or religion in general. Religion can have some use in self-esteem, community, and other aspects. What we're saying is that if whatever religion people are believing in, if it's causing them harm and shame and psychological harm, there's ways that you can include whatever beliefs that you have, but let go of the ones that are helpful or hurtful to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's people ask like, why do people stay in toxic relationships, right? And there's a lot of reasons, but like I think the biggest one is familiarity, right? They're a fear of the unknown, right? To leave that relationship and to go out and it's painful, it's horrible, but it's a familiar type of suffering, right? Versus the fear of the unknown is actually that anticipation of the fear is much greater um, motivator to keep somebody in a toxic relationship. So if you have an old habit or behavior, people are afraid to give up these beliefs that they have, right? Because they don't know what would come outside of that. What comes after that? So really, if you've grown up indoctrinated with a lot of these cultural beliefs about shame around sexuality, it's not easy to turn around or prevents them from doing it.
Great. Um, in terms of intimacy, how can people imagine intimacy beyond the screen? Like just to start to imagine it. Then we can act on it, hopefully. But what's kind of just, can you give something positive to the audience saying, how can we be more intimate and intentional?
Yeah, think of like if you're a guy, think of a girl that you saw on the subway, a coworker you liked that you found attractive, and find a place to sit them to bring that back, right? As if you were there again, back the memory of that attractive person. And really, in this visualization, yourself going up to this person instead of just seeing them go by. Imagine yourself taking in despite the fear, because you're totally fine. You're visualization, but imagine yourself taking a different, and imagine the feeling of her giving you her number, right, or her Instagram or contact, and how it feels after that, how happy you feel about yourself, right? This is um this is a process of visualization that I think manifests. It's like the book that you recommended to me a while ago about, I forgot the title of it, but
Mind magic.
really, Mind Magic by I forgot his name, but he wrote Into the Magic Box as well. A scenario, a real set happened, but with an alternate ending to it. Imagining yourself going and talking to the girl in public, right? So what I would, right, is to think of a real of you taking actions and playing out differently.
Great. And by the way, Mark and I are doing some visualization and resets. Mark every Tuesday and myself every Thursday. I had one yesterday. Feel free to go on our website and look at the digital reset section to book a group session. You can turn your camera and mic off. You have to actually. So even if you're shy or ashamed, please join those on Tuesdays and Thursday. But more importantly, let's go back to the discussion and kind of also see what could be. We talked a lot about men and porn, and we know that women watch porn as well. So 90, there was a study, 42 countries, 97% of population have watched porn once, and 80 watch it regularly, something like that. So regularly depends what degree and month, years, or whatnot. But what would you say that women can conceive porn as for themselves, for their partner, for their kids, right? Because some mothers are concerned that their kids are going to be on porn soon. Talk a bit about that, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm a consequentialist when it comes to this. I think ultimately porn is not necessarily a bad thing in doses, right? If you're a concerned mother of your son, right? It's normal when he's going through puberty, perhaps that he's going to be exposed to as long as it's done in moderation. But ultimately, the outcome, right, is what I would think about here. If the outcome of him is depriving himself of opportunities to meet other people, then that is net negative. But if it's ultimately, helping him cope with a lot of these needs, and it's not necessarily preventing him from meeting others, it's something that it shouldn't necessarily be worried about. So in the end, I think just look at this from an outcome perspective. What outcome is this behavior having on your life?
Thanks for that. And yes, I think parents might also still have some stigma about sex for themselves or talking about sex with their children. There's a lot of people who don't want to talk about sex with their family members,
Yeah.
and I think that's giving a disservice to their family and to the society, because the more you don't know, the more you can do things that are not good for you. And so we're here also to educate families and youth and give them tools if they need to talk about this in a way that they're comfortable talking about, and that would increase the awareness and prevent the potential problems of having
Yeah.
a daughter on OnlyFans, or
Yeah.
send it to porn. Or
Well, I literally I read a news article today talking about this OnlyFans creator, right? She was like 18, going to Boston College, and she literally approached her parents with a business proposal, a business plan, saying like, "Hey, if I do this, if I go on OnlyFans, like I can actually like make a decent living if this goes well." Her parents approved of it. Her parents literally approved of it and said, "Hey, yeah, why not?" And now she's become very successful with it. And I think she's pivoting her career for just focusing on OnlyFans now.
Interesting. Again, no judgment. I think the only thing I can judge is
Yeah.
that there's open communication with the parents, and that's the key, right? To at least have that communication where, I've heard so many stories. I've been ostracized from my family because of my sexual orientation or my sexual activity or my sexual fetish, or right. So, um, yeah, less for digital use, but we're talking about porn, which related to sex, and we want to kind of give people the voice to say, hey, we're here to listen, we're not judging, and we know a lot of people like you who've been experiencing maybe some of those issues, and we can prevent, if you're going on the right track, it's good. If you're slipping, don't wait till it's too late, where you've lost your relationship, your job, your grades, everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't wait until it's too late, right? Oftentimes people do unconsciously wait until it's too late.
And so one more thing about parents, we were in a conference about behavioral addiction, and luckily we had some European colleagues that had some data about children in the internet, and specifically about themselves sharing naked pictures and watching porn. It's very difficult in
Mm.
Canada and in the US to get approval to make some of those studies because of parental rights and all this, but there is a few countries in Europe that could do it. And I don't think you would be shocked to know that 12, 13, 14 years old are watching porn. And it's better to know this and help them than to like close their eyes and saying it's going to be okay because I put parental controls. We did an interview a month ago, right, Mark, with Marvel on our website. If you want to check it out, neuroscientist that tells us that parental control. How do they work, Mark? Mark might have been a little bit frozen. Are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
back now. Yeah. I, w- I was actually going to say that, parental controls can get you so far. Not having a phone, it can get you even further, right? And like the right technology can help mitigate access. I think that, you know, shameless self-promotion here, but we are developing a phone actually that helps mitigate porn usage, social media usage in children. Um, Part of our, I think if you're living in Europe, you can go and order this online as well. But it's there's a lot of devices out there that are being developed, right, to give kids limited access, right? Because I think these developmental years are so important, and it's important that you moderate the content in these early years for their children.
Yeah, and to clarify, the device is approved as a medical device in Europe. Uh,
Yes.
it will be available also in Canada and the US in the coming month. If you're thinking of giving a phone to your children, please contact us. We can give you more information.
Hmm.
If you're a young adult and also want to check that out, if you're having difficulty with social media or
Hmm.
pornography and you've tried other apps that don't work, please reach out to us. So, one last thing that we can talk about in terms of what is other solution traps. We talked about psychology, we talked about technology. Let's broaden it out to like community and um, how can we use awe, for instance, to like a walk in nature, a laughter with your friend. How can that compete with an
Yeah.
explicit sexual video?
Well, I mean, the first letter in awe is A, so it stands for awareness, right? Becoming aware of these behavioral patterns that you might be stuck in and how this is having an effect over your life, right? So, really going for a walk in nature is good, but really try to become aware of urges, impulses, things that are completely normal, right? These thoughts that come to your mind, don't shame yourself for having them. Don't don't negatively judge it, but just become aware and become aware of the way that you deal with these thoughts, that you deal with these needs, right? And I think building this awareness around around your own thoughts and the way that you cope with uh, certain things that come to your mind, it give you a lot of insight around why you behave in a certain way, right? A lot of people act in ways that are just that don't merely make sense to themselves, right? But when you look under the hood and perhaps starting a meditation routine, going for a walk in nature, and understanding, oh wow, like my mind is like watching TV without a remote controls, and then the channels are just flickering and going. And when I have these thoughts, I react in this certain way. Having that sort of insight can be very powerful for a lot of people.
Thanks, which reminds me that today, Friday, I will be attending Eckhart Tolle's talk in Montreal. So I'll
Nice.
more about that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Definitely some insights on being present and aware.
Hmm.
And we try to, incorporate awareness in everything that we're talking about in doing so. It's about awareness of yourself and awareness
Yep.
of non-self, that you're not just your thoughts.
Yeah.
You're also more than that. You're just the awareness. And we talk about this in our resets, but it's also about awareness to the public, awareness about the tools and the incredible information that we have. We quoted a few articles today, but also talked about real life events. And Mark and I have been working together, doing all this work to give you this awareness because we believe that those are topics that we don't talk enough about and that we're distracted with our
Hmm.
devices. And thank you, Mark, for being in this journey with me to bring that awareness, not only for us, but for other people to communicate, to share it, to say, hey, people are doing these things in the world, to give awareness and a possibility to, incorporating pornography or not in your life is your choice. But if you do so, do it in a
Hmm.
healthy, aware way. Think about your wellness, and yeah,
Yes.
do enjoy it if something that you do, but know that it's not the only thing that you can enjoy. There's many other things, and you can enjoy many things, right?
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I'm very grateful, likewise, for being on this journey with you.
So in closing, we want to well, first of all, recognize that it was Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Day. So this is an Inuit art,
Hmm.
promoting Canada and Indigenous culture as well. Shamelessly, intrinsic desire is something that we cannot control. Some people have urges. We talked about having urges with zoophilia, sex with children, with animals, pedophilia. um, okay, that's what can happen. And the intensity and duration of those urges varies. People want to have sex 10 times a day and some 10 times a year or twice a year, right? And that's the intrinsic part, and that can modulate depending on testosterone, estrogen, and other hormones, cortisol, serotonin levels. We know that SSRIs are affecting sometimes sex drive. There's a lot of things that can make you have those desires, and a lot of things that can make you have your aversions. And there's culture, and there's religion, and there's social media, and there's all those things. So we can say that sex and porn is unique and complex. Um, don't judge yourself about that. Don't judge others either, what they're doing, what they're not doing. Just concentrate on being healthy and aware and non-judgmental. Um, and I think that having more of those discussion, everyone uh, that are here on the live or watching this later, uh, engage with us, engage with each other. Let's destigmatize porn or corn. And last word to you, Mark.
I mean, anyone who's suffering right now, just know that there is a solution. There's a solution to any problem in life, and whether you see it or not, and go out and find help, right? Whether it's from AWE or from a therapist in your area, go out and find help for your problem because there is a solution, right? And um, I want everybody to just leave with that message that there's hope.
Thanks. And there is hope. And thanks for this collaboration on
Hmm.
another podcast on Friday.
Yep.
We do have some more guests and more of those podcasts coming. If you like, please do like, share. It's the time to share the love, as we hopefully gave you almost 90 minutes of porn-free digital love with compassion. Let's finish the corny jokes and wish you all a great weekend. See you guys soon. We'll have some live events in Munich and Montreal as well in October, doing lots of things. So please reach out on the website, on the social media. And thanks a lot, marketing team, for organizing this. Thanks, Mark, for sharing some of those stories and insights.
See you, everyone. Thanks so much.